Welcome everyone to the On Time, On Target Financial Thought Leader Series. It's my pleasure to have James Short with us here today. You've already heard his bio, but welcome James to the show.
Hey Steve, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So he spent 20 years in digital media and then made a pretty altering type transition career-wise to go into the movie business out in California, which is super cool, and I can't wait to talk about all that. But we do need the background of how you got to there. So James, why don't you start us off with how'd you get started in digital media?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the best place to start, Steve, would be right when I was getting close to graduating college. I didn't have any plans to get into digital media, but I needed a job. And a friend of mine had a startup internet company in Austin during the internet boom of the late 90s, just to date myself a little bit here. And in 1998 and into 99, I started working for just a small internet-based company. It was like I started working for a small internet company called collegestudent.com, and we're like an online portal community for college students. And we sold advertising to local businesses. And I started working for them and just kind of fell into it. And, I had dreams of big stock options and going public and everybody else, like a lot of people did. Even though that didn't immediately happen for me, it was a really, really fun experience. I loved working in the industry, just super fast paced. I loved being in a small startup environment. And that's kind of, my first job out of college was at a startup, and except for, 8 small months at Dell, I've been in pretty much startup mode my entire career. So,
wow. Now that first job, you said it was a friend of yours. I'm just curious did you have to interview for that job, or was it hey, James, I need you, or was it, how did it kind of materialize?
Yeah, no, it did. My good friend, Erin, her boyfriend was the CEO of this company, collegestudent.com. And all I was doing was, data entry work, I think, at a law firm. And I was an English major at the time. I thought I was going to go into publishing or editing or something like that. But they needed people in Austin, where I went to school, University of Texas there, to get local businesses to start advertising on the site. And sales had always kind of terrified me. I'd never done that before. But something inside me told me, like, hey, this is some career skill. You should, even if you're scared of it, you should probably learn how to do this, because whether it's this or something else, you just need to, getting into a sales and business development career, you can apply that to whatever you do later on. And, so that's where it all started.
And then you mentioned that out of the 20-year period, you did 8 months at Dell. Was that like a corporate job? And was that kind of, I need the money to go work for Dell for a while? Or was it, I think I might like the corporate world, and then decided you didn't? Tell us that story.
Yeah, it's like, it was, hey, is the grass greener on that side kind of thing? Because you've never been to that side, right? So I had been, I had actually moved to the Washington, D.C. area. I was working for a startup called eStudentLoan.com, fantastic business, kind of like a lending tree for student loans. But we had been acquired a couple of times, and I'd been with them 3 years, and I was getting restless for something new. I missed Austin a little bit, and my good friend Bentley, who you know very well, in fact, he's responsible for introducing us. He was at Dell, and my resume kind of on top there, and got me an interview, and it worked out. It was for corp sales, probably managing inside accounts for the 100 to 300 employee sized businesses. And I said, hey, you know what? I've never worked for a Fortune 50 company before. Let's see what this is like. So packed up my stuff, moved to Austin, which was great. But working with Dell and their systems and everything it was overwhelming at first. I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown at one point, just because you're managing that many accounts and it's throwing so much at you. It was really overwhelming, and I love the people there, but it was much more transactional. And I thought it was going to be more relationship based sales and business development. And that was a little bit of it, but maybe like 20%. And what I really loved about sales and business development was just establishing relationships, right? I've always believed, as long as you find a product you believe in, a service you believe in, and then in something that you can put your name on, right? And establish relationships with great people, that's gonna lead to a lot of success. That's always worked out for me anyway. And
oh yeah, you bet.
Yeah. But I wasn't getting that at Dell. And this was around the 2004 timeframe. And soon after I had started, my former boss at East Student Loan and good friend Bryan, he was starting a new company back in DC. And I had only been at Dell a couple of months, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm not sure if you're liking it there or not, but
right.
I want you to help me start this company if you're willing to come back to DC." And I said, "Yes, absolutely." So I turned back around 8 months after I moved to Austin, and went to DC and helped Bryan and two other guys start a company called Market Hardware. And that was that was a company that helped small businesses get websites, search marketing. This was when Google was just starting to become a household name.
Right. And when you went back to DC for Market Hardware, was your friend looking for your skill set or some capital or both, or did they have capital coming from somewhere else to kind of start this business?
He was looking for skill set. Yes, at the time, I did not have my own capital, and I wasn't out there raising money for anything. He had put a lot of his own money and some of his friends and family money, and started the business. So yeah.
Oh, very nice. And then how long you spent out in DC this time around?
So I was there. We had so we started Market Hardware in 2004, and we sold it to IAC. We sold it to HomeAdvisor. They were called Service Magic, under the IAC umbrella, Barry Diller's company, right?
Right, yeah.
And that was in 2009. We were super proud of that because we sold that company when the Dow was probably around like 6,500 or something like that. So the fact that we sold that business in that market condition, we were thrilled, and we loved the people at Service Magic. They really understood what we did, and we were adding a lot of value. Our little company was adding a lot of value to their 1,000-person company. We were probably only 40 employees at the time. And so they had, we kept our office. And for another 3 years, I was there continuing to manage Market Hardware. Market Hardware kept its brand, building websites directly for businesses. But then I also came on to HomeAdvisor. And at that time, they changed their name from Service Magic to HomeAdvisor, and helped train and coach their 800 sales and customer service people on how to sell websites. So I did that for about 3.5 years after the acquisition. That was 2012. By that time, I was super burnt out. I was ready for a change.
Burned out in the business, or burned out on DC life, or all together, or?
Yeah, great question. I mean, around that time, Yes, I was burned out on just the going back and forth to Denver all the time. Frankly, it was there probably every other month for 3.5 years. It was just an overwhelming amount of work, managing people in the DC office, as well as trying to coach and manage all the processes and things we were doing in Colorado and even Kansas City. And but at the time we had really accomplished a lot too. At the same time, I felt really good about all that we had done. And so I felt like I kind of hit a growth plateau, as well as just being kind of mentally, physically exhausted. So I took a time out. I went to go travel the world for a bit, which I'd never really taken the time to do. So I said my goodbyes to everybody and went to Peru and Colombia for a while, which was amazing. And then I went to Europe for a little and bummed around there for a while. At that Europe trip is actually when I met my brother over at the Cannes Film Festival and got my first film festival experience. And, you know, I had always loved movies, TV since I was a little kid. Always in the back of my mind, I wanted to do something, creating content, telling stories. It's my English major. I love reading. I love writing. I loved and just really appreciated like how somebody could put such an emotional experience with, on 2 hours on the screen. And my brother had been in the film industry for a while already, based in LA. And I got a taste of the glitz and glamour of it. I met Kanye West and Jay-Z at a party, and was out till 6 a.m. every morning for 3 days in a row, drinking rosé on the Croisette there in Cannes. And I was like, you know what, this isn't bad. Maybe I'm due for a career change.
Well, there you go. How did you? For getting that taste, how did you not jump right into movies then, instead of you came back to Austin next, right?
Actually, no. I stayed in DC, just kind of camped out there. I came back home, and I was kind of planning my next move. I had decided that I wanted to be in Los Angeles, and I needed to be there if I was going to get closer to the entertainment industry. I wasn't quite sure what my path was going to be, but I knew I had a great connection with my brother, of course, who had been in the international sales part of the business. I'll talk a little bit about that more later. Sure. But I also had a very good friend that was in post-production, a great friend from college in LA. So, moving to a big city and having kind of some built-in trusted people like that to help kind of grease the skids, so to speak, was attractive to me, of course. And not to mention, the weather and just wanted to change. I'd been in DC for except for those stint back in Texas, 12 years. So I wanted to be around more creative people as well. DC is a great town, don't get me wrong. I loved it there, but it revolves around the government, and I wanted to be around people that were in film and TV. So that's where you've got to be. During that time, I was again interject Matt Bentley back into the story. I'm now realizing how pivotal a relationship that's been in my life now. Mm-hmm. That keeps cropping up all the time. By that time, Matt, he had started his own business, Q1Media, about 8 years before, with Bill Weeman, of course, and Bill and Matt and I, we all used to work together at collegestudent.com in Austin. We made really good friends, especially good Matt. And Matt was just telling, and in fact, I was already doing a little bit of consulting on the side for them leading up to this point. We'd already kind of started working together. And Matt's business was taking off, especially the programmatic advertising part of the business was starting to take off. And for
what year was
this? Those that don't know what programmatic advertising, no, this is 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. So I quit Market Hardware in the spring of Market Hardware / HomeAdvisor. I quit that in the spring of 2012. And by the fall of 2012, Matt and Bill were expanding their operations in Los Angeles. They were bringing on a guy, Phil Banfield, who I also knew back from our Austin days together, to be the CEO and merge their video network part of their business with their sales part of their business based in Austin. And but the programmatic advertising part of the business was really taking off. And all that means is machines and algorithms started getting involved in the buying and selling of all the internet ads that we all see every day, right? And it was creating.
So I can clarify that in my mind. Is that like matchmaking? There's content and then there's demand, and the computer's kind of putting all that together versus a human having to get in there and do it. Okay.
Exactly.
Was 2012 kind of the first time that that's really happened on a big scale?
It was starting. I mean, it already started. I mean, probably around 2009, 2010 is where some big things started happening in the market. I think that's probably around when Google bought DoubleClick, maybe a little bit before then. Companies started like Rubicon, which is now one of the biggest ad exchanges, supply side platforms, just ad tech platforms in the business started around then as well. All of and basically what it was doing is just, using data and computers and algorithms to find efficiencies in the marketplace to serve they're trying to serve the right ad to the right person at the right time, right?
Right, makes sense.
Using technology to do that, just using technology to do it instead of the traditional way. They were using, humans to doing it, kind of like data entry with human beings into a computer. So I had no idea how that worked. It was a big consolation to me when I started working for Q1Media that a lot of people in the industry weren't quite sure how it worked either, but they knew it was working. But Matt knew that I was looking to move to Los Angeles. He knew that I was just really great at relationships. I thrived in a small company environment. And he was like, hey, we need somebody to go out there and meet these people behind pulling the levers of all these robots, buying all these ads. And so I said, great, you know what? That sounds like a great opportunity for me to come into Los Angeles with a job, making money, instead of hemorrhaging all my savings that I've been doing all year pretty much. And so I officially started in October of 2012 with Q1Media and moved to Los Angeles, to Venice Beach to be exact.
Ah, very nice. And then of course that ended a few years later when you decided to make the transition off into the movie business. So tell us about that, not only from a risk perspective. Was that the dangerous leap, or were you so used to kind of bouncing around so much that it really wasn't as big a deal? And then of course your brother's involved in that. So tell us kind of about that transition and your start in the movie business.
Sure, 100%. And when we talk about risk, right, it's relative to everyone. What's risk to me, it might be not risky to someone else, or maybe completely insane, right? But I'll tell you my experience, right? When I started working for Q1Media, it was fantastic. It was like we were building a rocket ship as we were flying it. We grew 500% in like 3 or 4 years. It was really incredible. And because of that, everybody participated in, some financial success of that. So I was able to save up some money from that experience, which was great. I did not go out and, buy a house for myself, or I stayed in my same apartment and still am today, actually, in Venice, California, that I moved to there. And because I knew that as much as I loved about, Q1Media and how much we were growing, I also knew that, you know, my heart was still in content, telling stories. I wanted to be more in the content creation part of the business, not necessarily the technology, you know, that interests me.
Right.
You know, I need to do that. So I decided to, you know, try, you know, live within my means, establish, you know, through connections with my brother and others, establish relationships in Los Angeles and with people in the industry, you know, going out and getting drinks and maybe tag along to a film festival and do these things to establish a network.
Sure.
And so by the time, and actually the most important thing was reestablish my friendship with John, with my brother. We hadn't lived in the same city for probably 15 years. We had to get to know each other.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, that was probably the most important thing. And and to John's credit, John finally one day, we were driving back from a camping trip and he's like, you know what, let's just start, let's produce a film. Let's start this. And I was really happy to hear him say that. I was ready too. And there was a lot of, so by 2016, there were a lot of changes happening in the programmatic advertising space, a lot of consolidation happening. And, you know, I could see that there's going to be this big transition. And I could see the next year, so this would be a good time for me if I was going to exit and get into it. This would probably be a good time.
Okay.
So saving up money, establishing a relationship with my brother, establishing relationships in Los Angeles, I felt comfortable enough to take the leap. And so I finally did that in the summer of 2017. So we officially started our business in 2016, but John and I both still had our full-time jobs. He was working for an international sales company. I was still working for Q1Media. And but you know, we did a lot of the administrative stuff. We set up the legal entity, right? Got our website, got our logo going, starting to tell people that we're in business. And we had a few false starts, and we started looking at projects. So by that I mean, you know, we would see a script, we would like a script, we would try to, like, you know, maybe put a director attached to it, or do some of these other things to kind of what we call packaging film, right? Which all that means is you're putting together the key elements of a film to go raise financing for it. And in independent film, there's lots of ways that you can finance a film. But when John and I, our original intent when we started our company, Inwood Road Films. Inwood Road is the name of the street we grew up on in Fort Worth, Texas, by the way.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had the intention of leveraging John's experience and network on the international side of the business. What that means is that films internationally, or better said, international audiences, there's just, you know, different tastes and different things to appeal to international audiences than domestic or American. There's loads of overlap, but there's some things that international buyers, international audiences really want. They typically like, you know, action movies, thriller movies, horror movies. They typically like a name brand star attached. And so one of the ways you can finance films is if the international buyer, let's say somebody in Asia, they really love the script that you have and the director, and maybe you've got a main cast member and that's all you have, they will give you money up front, what's called a pre-sale, in exchange for getting rights to distribute the film. And for them, they see they're taking more risk, but they're buying the film for a lot less. If it comes out at if it comes out as a success, they've got to pay a lot more for it later to then turn around and show movie screens in their country, right?
Right.
So our plan was to use pre-sales. John knew, okay, I know my buyers, you know, they like action films and they like Nicolas Cage and all these elements, right? If we can find a project that I know they'll like, we can get a lot of money up front, and maybe that won't be enough to finance the entire film, but enough to get the ball rolling, right? And I also had access to some investment capitals from relationships that I had. John and I, like I said, saved up some of our own money to invest a little bit as well. And so, you know, we were confident between all those things and our relationships with other financiers that we could get enough to round out the full budget. That was our intention.
And then you kind of talked the budget. What sort of numbers are we talking in the independent space? Are we talking hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands up front, or hundreds of thousands? Or are we up into the millions? Kind of what ballpark are you in?
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll talk about it at 2016. And I'll talk about it where we are now.
Okay.
Because the number has gotten smaller over time. Because in general, as technology advances, filmmakers are able to do a lot more with less.
Okay.
And I'll go into a little bit more, but at the time, John and I were looking for, you know, $3 to $5 million budget projects. And though, you know, you don't need to make, you know, movie budgets range, you know, all over the place, right? You can do it for $500,000. You can do it for $50 million. You can do it $150 million, right? We are an independent film. So an independent film, you have to go out and you have to, you got to make the movie. You got to get the money first to make it, then make your money back after you sell the film, right? This budget level of the 3 to 5 million was kind of what international, those are the size of budgets of the international films that we thought we saw in the market, right?
Okay.
But very soon after we started the company, it became very evident to John in particular that with the rise of global distribution through streamers and people just not going to the movies as much, you know, economies overseas just, you know, being inconsistent, people were not paying that much money for international. And I remember John coming home from a Cannes Film Festival in 2016, and he was like, wow, it's really tough market out there. I don't know, it's going to be hard. It's more and more difficult for investors to recoup money on a $3 to $5 million film. Buyers aren't giving as many pre-sale opportunities now. We should think about pivoting. And this is one of the things I would tell anybody starting in any business. But if you set out and you make a plan, like that's great. You should have a plan, but you should also be nimble enough and be ready to pivot if you need to. And so,
absolutely,
John, so, you know, so we, you know, for about a year, we tried to find a project. We tried to pivot a bit. And I really wanted to dedicate more time. I had a feeling that, you know, things just were not moving as fast as I would. And I finally had to tell myself, look, if I really want to give a go at this, I'm going to have to dedicate my full time to it. I can't have a full-time job and all my responsibilities to this one company, while also trying to get another company off the ground.
Sure. And
so I said to myself, look, you know, and I was worried, do I have enough money in the bank? Right.
Sure.
Do I have enough relationships set up? You know, all those things. And you just got to tell yourself, like, look, like you just got to go for it, you know? And I finally did. I worked it out with Matt, just and the owners there at Q1Media when it would be, you know, ideal for everybody for me to exit, and we worked all that out. And then so in the summer of 2017, I left Q1Media and focused on Inwood Road Films full time.
Wow, and that's an amazing found our story.
First, thank you. No, I was just going to say we found, you know, sure enough, a few months later, we found our first film to invest in, which is a film called Plus One. So,
I was gonna say, I'm hoping that's Plus One, because I would really like to hear about kind of I know you have some others out there that are that you're working on now, but the Plus One seems to be like your first almost kind of end-to-end experience in the business. And what a great movie. So kind of talk us through that experience. That seems like a home run to me.
Thank you. Yeah. It was It was absolutely a home run, just in terms of the experience you get working on a film, the people you get to work with, the commercial success, the critical success, all those things, right? I hope it's not beginner's luck. Time will tell. But it was a
Right.
fantastic experience. And no, I will interpret it as a sign that I'm doing something right, and for better or worse, that's the way I'm interpreting it. So that film came to us through an independent producer named Milan Chakraborty. Just a side note, Milan is fantastic. He's been an independent film for 12 or 13 years now. He's been super generous. He's kind of been a mentor to me and John, especially on the domestic side of independent film. And he's brought us, I think, 4 of the 6 projects that we're a part of right now. And he said, "Hey, there's this film plus one. They need this remaining capital to financing the film, equity financing, and I needed a credit. I did not have any. If you pull me up on IMDb, as I was starting to put my name out there, I didn't have anything associated with me, right?
Right.
And so I needed an executive producer credit to demonstrate to the outside film, TV world that I was, serious about being in the business.
Sure. Yeah. Some
When
legitimacy.
you invest in a film, totally, absolutely. So, look, and this was kind of my strategy from the beginning, was really just to buy my way in, right? Most producers come up through the system. A lot of them start in college, like USC's got a producing program, right?
Okay.
They start on the crew of a film set. They come up, in their 20s and then 30s, and they move on up. My path is a lot less, is not traditional in that sense
Right.
at all. So my goal was to use a little bit of the capital that I had, and John and I had, the larger investment capital that I had access to, was to be active investors. So, there were some exceptions to this, but in general, we were only looking for those films that welcomed investors that we don't need any creative influence. Like, that's really reserved for producers of the film, and there's a good reason for that. But we were looking for projects where they were very generous and open about, letting us come to set, allowing us to have inputs on the first rough cuts of the film, like send them notes on what we liked, what we thought worked, what didn't work. Just let us be, just expose us to the whole process. And Ross Putman was the lead producer on this film plus one. And we had actually already met him, and he had a really great reputation. And Milan, completely went to bat for him as well. And we loved and trusted Milan. And the price was right for us. And the script, frankly, at the beginning, like, we liked it. I didn't think like this was a home run script. I thought that this was a cute, edgy, predictable romantic comedy. And that's exactly what you want. You want a script. This is something I kind of learned later, which may seem obvious to some, but in our business, you want a project that knows its audience, 100% knows its audience, and that script, that story sets out and reaches it. And
right.
that's what Plus One did. Like, even though, yes, it was predictable, but it was a funny, a little bit raunchy, edgy way to get to the end. And I also knew Maya Erskine, who's the female lead in it. I had seen her in a show on Hulu that she had a pretty big part in, and she was hysterical. Like, she was hilarious. And so that, plus Ross, plus Ben Stiller's company, Red Hour Films, was leading all the production services on it. They were involved in the film, and heard great things about them. And so all those things said, yes, let's do this. And they started shooting they were starting to shoot in like 8 weeks. So we kind of had to make the decision.
Right.
That's why John and I, we didn't have a lot of time even to go to our investors like, hey, this is our first film, you want to invest in it? We like the idea of risking our own money first. Frankly, we're more careful with other people's money than our own. And we needed that experience, right? And yeah, so it was a wonderful experience. Got to go to set a lot, see how it was all made. During this time, actually, I also started taking entertainment finance class at UCLA, an extension course, just to familiarize myself more with the financing of independent film. We can talk about a little bit about that more later.
Did that help a lot, or was it academic versus reality?
Yeah, it did. In fact, it did. In fact, a lot of it was based on stuff that I had learned from John. So I was actually felt kind of advanced, but it definitely educated me more on the waterfall structure, on how investors get paid back in an independent film. And we can talk a little bit more about that.
Let's take a second to explain that.
Sure.
What do you mean by that? And finish it with, how long do you get tails 10 years from now kind of thing as an investor?
Yeah, absolutely. So when independent film is created, typically it's its own independent, the production itself, you create an own LLC for it. This is what you do this because it gives the producers all the operational control over the film, but allows all the investors to be members of that LLC and of that property, but without all the personal liability that could be at stake for you as a filmmaker, right? So that structure helps give producers the control they need. They're not risking their own personal financial situation. And for investors, it gives them transparency into exactly how the legal framework of the entire production is going to be made. And it allows them, they have when they're investing in the film, they have a piece of that film and a piece of the whatever may be included in that film. It sometimes includes the intellectual property of the film. Sometimes you have rights to derivative works down the road. So it gives you all this kind of flexibility. Within the LLC, there is usually or sometimes there maybe be a separate subscription agreement, but basically under that framework of the LLC is this waterfall structure is established. And the waterfall structure is the order, it's the analogy of a waterfall from the very top where the water hits, right? From who gets paid back first, second, third, and so on, right? And there's going to be some nuances here, but in general, I'll just lay out kind of the standard way that it works. Once money starts coming back in, so once you invest in the film, well, actually, let me start here. Typically, equity financiers of independent film, they get they're paid back in two primary ways, or they get paid back more than they invested. So the return on investment, typically what happens is they get a premium on that investment that's higher up in the waterfall. So typically what happens is they get their money back first, then they get, and standard is usually around a 20% premium, but sometimes it can be more, sometimes it can be less. But they'll get their money back plus 20%. Then they also get to participate in the net profits of the film.
And is that the tail that continues out?
In the waterfall. Exactly. That's the tail that continues out, right? So, and the net profits, typically, there are two profit pools that are established at the beginning of the film. And those can be split up. In general, they're split up 50-50, but those can be different as well. But once everybody's paid back, two profit pools. One for producers and talent. So that's producers for their upside in the film. Sometimes the director, maybe the main cast members may get some of that. That's all for people related to the production creative part of the film, right?
Okay.
The other 50% is for the investors. And in general, the percentage of your equity investment, like how much that represents of the budget of the film, is going to represent how much your percentage of that profit pool that you get.
Okay, that
So,
makes sense.
$1 million film, and you invested $100,000 of that. Typically, you're going to get paid. If you get a 20% premium, you'll get 120% of your money. So 100% plus 20% back. Then there'll be some people that need to be paid back after that premium is paid. Sales commission fees. There may be some of the actors, maybe if they defer some of their fees till after that happens, sometimes that'll go in front of net profits. Everybody's paid back, kick in, and then at that, let's say the film makes it's a $1 million budget film. It makes, on top of that, so it makes $2 million gross, or $1 million in profit, right?
Okay.
And this is net profit, okay? So $500,000 of that goes towards the investors. My $100,000 original investment represented 10% of equity, right?
Okay.
So I get 10% of that 50% pool, or another way of saying it. Does that make sense?
It does. I can follow the math there. And does that continue forever, or is
that
it
continues
sometimes
forever for the life of the film? Yep. So in perpetuity, and and there are more and more income streams happening today, more than ever, for independent film, which is great as an investor.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I can see that.
And especially with the pandemic happening right now, it's been difficult to start production, but at the same time, streaming viewership is, it was up 85% the first the first month of the pandemic, right? It's crazy. So now producers make money. They can deal with streaming platform. They can do a deal with a distributor for theaters. They can do a video on demand, which is just like you pull it up on your DirecTV and you pay $5.99 for it, or you buy it for $5.99 on iTunes.
Right.
You can still, there's still DVD sales. There's still the red box rental places outside of grocery stores. There's advertising video on demand, which is becoming much, much bigger, like Pluto and Tubi TV, free streaming channels that are playing movies for free, but you just have to watch ads with them. There's TV deals, of course, that can be done. So if you'd like me to continue, I can talk about Plus One a little bit and how.
Well, actually, I was going to say, why don't we transition into your latest project? You mentioned COVID-19. Obviously, we're in the heart of that and in second wave, and who knows whether it's almost over or just beginning, right? But talk about that and your latest project, Brick House. That's just, that thing writes itself, right? And you think it's going to be a huge success. Are you showing up, running into challenges because of COVID-19?
Yeah, great question. So, just to talk about how the pandemic has affected the independent film industry in general. So the obvious challenge, of course, is physical production, right? People together on film sets, that can't happen right now.
Right.
They are starting to loosen those restrictions in various parts of the country and the world. But when the pandemic happened, lots of these productions had to be just shut down and unwound altogether, right?
Right.
And what happened with COVID and how it's affecting the film industry is not unlike what it's doing to a lot of industries. And on a base level, it's accelerating change that was already happening. People were already watching more content at home. People were already watching their shows on Netflix or Amazon more than going to the theater. Now, you know, the Disneys and, you know, the big Pixar movies and the comic book movies, you know, those are driving a lot of the theater box office, right?
Right.
But with the rise of Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu, Apple Plus getting into the game, of course, that was already happening. With COVID-19 and everybody being forced home, that just accelerated it, right?
Okay.
So when it comes to, it's accelerating the power structure change. It's accelerating what's going to happen with theaters, right? All of us going to the theater experience. It's not going away. It's just going to change. And I think in a lot of ways it's going to be a lot better, frankly. And it's changing production too. So from a power structure standpoint, you know, independent producers are going to have a lot more power. There's such a demand for content because not as much can be produced right now. And in fact, I think a lot of agents that are going to be moving into manager roles, even producing roles, agents are having a hard time right now because a lot of them were, they had their hands in lots of different revenue streams with their clients, as well as with, like, they're also trying to produce movies too. And, you know, a lot of the writers and people kind of cried foul on that. In fact, last year, the writers, they fired all their agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these agents, they work for big agencies. They depend on revenue from, you know, they're relying on big theater box office to, like, justify how much their clients get made. But now with the, you know, hidden streaming numbers and global distribution and the data, not box office receipts, that streamers are using to value talent in the marketplace, agents just aren't able to make as much money. It's just a harder game for them.
Right.
But they do have lots of actor relationships, director relationships, writer relationships. That's what producers do, right? They have those relationships with the talent out there. But what independent producers have that agents don't have is they have relationships with people with money that want to invest in film, right? We see a lot of agents partnering up with producers, creating their own companies, making their own independent content, right? We're going to see, from a theater standpoint, you're going to see Disney. Well, what happened is recently the Department of Justice is striking down a 1948 law that forbids studios and distributors from owning movie theaters. Back then, the Supreme Court made that illegal because the studios would have a monopoly in the entire movie industry, right?
Right.
They
Okay.
would
That
control the
makes
entire
sense,
supply chain. So ever since then, and that was great for the industry. That allowed independent movie theaters to come up. It allowed independent film more to find its audiences. But now these you know, the AMC movie chains, Regal Cinemas of the world, like, they're getting crushed for obvious reasons, right?
Right.
But what I think is going to happen is Netflix and Amazon, Apple Plus even, they're going to take over these movie theaters, and they're going to be showing films based on what their data people are watching in their local market, right? So what's going to be shown in Denver will be shown in Los Angeles, shown as different in Jacksonville. Plus, they're going to be able to do any merchandising they want to do around that as well. So it's just going to be a different experience. And I think those movies, local markets, going to be tailored more to what those people want to watch. And then last but not least, production. What I said earlier about doing less with more, right? You know, we don't know when actors are going to feel comfortable going back to set.
Right.
Crews, right? Unions are going to start establishing all these guidelines that producers are going to have to, you know, to follow in order to get their production off the ground. So you're not going to see these big, expansive movie sets with you know, hundreds of extras anymore. If you see that, there's a chance it's going to be high definition virtual video, right? Like Disney's The Mandalorian, Disney Plus The Mandalorian is a good example.
Great show,
right? Those background shots are those are high definition 3D, right? With developing a TV series called Scratch with the team in New York. The creator, Ronan Jora in particular, he's a visual effects guy. This guy made a short film, the short film Scratch. It looks like he made it for $100,000. He made it for $10,000.
Oh, wow.
This technology is here. But now the market economics are really forcing it to being adopted even faster, right? So
sure.
You're just gonna see maybe smaller sets, more high definition 3D, more technology. And with that said, despite the slowdown in production for scripted feature films, so that's what I've typically been talking about. What I'm talking about is scripted movies with actors, the cast, right? Which is different, of course, from documentary films, nonfiction films, which Brick House is the first film that we're doing with that. Before the pandemic set in, we were already looking at more documentary projects. We were just, for whatever reason, we were more interesting ones. Documentaries right now, I mean, they're talked about just as much, if not more, than feature films, especially, with what Netflix is rolling out and all these documentaries coming out, whether it's, the one of the Fire Festival or Tiger King, what was it? Joe Exotic's
Tiger King,
documentary, right? Tiger King, yeah. We love documentaries anyway, but traditionally they take a long time to make. There weren't as big audiences out there for them. Theaters weren't picking them up, right? But with streaming now, and you can probably make them for even less than you could before, the content, the stories being told in documentary fashion right now are so amazing. We're getting more involved in it, and documentaries don't require an actors union to tell you that you need to follow these 13 different guidelines before you can open up your movie set, right? You can go out with film with 4 people and start making your movie. So we love that. I'll talk about Brick House too. We have another docu-series called Year Zero that we just got involved in as well. And so we really love the opportunity for documentaries and nonfiction space right now.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great, James. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. I just want to say thank you so much for giving the insight to all of us that you have in this kind of behind the scenes look as to kind of a serial entrepreneur up until finding where you wanted to be up into the movie space, and how you did all the right things, including some education. So hopefully those are some great lessons to pass on to anybody out there looking to follow in your footsteps. How can folks, I know you're big on relationships, for those who want to get connected with you, how can they find you either on social media or through a website to kind of read more, hear more?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for asking, Steve. Our website is inwoodroadfilms.com. We have a contact form on there. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook, my LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to answer any additional questions I have, talk about some of the projects that we're rolling out. And I could talk all day about this stuff. So thank you.
Right. Well, it's clear to see the passion in your eyes. So thanks again. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's clear to see the passion in your eyes, and thanks again for being on. And for our listeners, this is why we do the Financial Thought Leadership Series, is so you can get kind of a behind the scenes look of some things to think about. So best of luck to everybody. Thanks for listening in, and here's to you fighting the good fight with staying on time, on target with your financial goals. We'll talk to you next time.